Emily Carter felt the change before she understood it. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavier than usual, like the walls were holding their breath. Evening light stretched across the living room, touching the framed wedding photo on the shelf. Emily stood near the window, watching the rain fall on the street in thin silver lines. Her life felt settled, steady, and lately, strangely distant. Upstairs, Daniel moved from room to room, folding laundry with careful hands. He had always been the organized one. The man who believed routine kept a marriage safe. They had been married for 11 years, living in a calm neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. No drama, no shouting, just two people moving through days. That looked fine from the outside. Emily loved her husband. She was sure of that. But love had become quiet. Conversations stayed on the surface. Evenings passed with phones and tired smiles. She missed the feeling of being truly seen, though she never said it out loud. Told herself this was normal. This was marriage. The knock on the door came suddenly. Was firm, not rushed, not shy. Emily froze for a second, then walked toward the door. Through the glass, she saw a tall figure standing under the porch light. When she opened it, cool air and rain rushed. Mark Reynolds stood there, his hair damp, his jacket dark with rain. Emily recognized him immediately. Daniel had mentioned him often long hours at work, shared projects, late meetings. She had met him once at a summer picnic. He had smiled politely and stayed near the edge of the crowd. "I'm sorry to come by so late," Mark said. His voice was calm, but his eyes looked tired. "I didn't know who else to talk to." Emily hesitated. She glanced toward the stairs, then back at him. She didn't feel fear. She felt concern. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Mark nodded slightly. "Yes, kind of. I just needed help. And I didn't want to bother Daniel at work tomorrow." Emily stepped aside and let him in. The door closed behind him, and the house felt different at once. Mark stood awkwardly near the entryway, unsure where to put his hands. He looked around as if he was seeing the space for the first time, even though he had been there before. "Can I get you some water?" Emily asked. "That would be great. Thank you." They moved into the kitchen. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the space between them. Emily handed him a glass. Their fingers didn't touch, but she noticed the way his hands shook just a little. "I'm sorry," Mark said again. "I know this is strange. It's okay." Emily replied. "You said you needed help." Mark took a breath, then let it out slowly. "I don't usually do this, show up unannounced, but tonight felt heavy." Emily leaned against the counter, listening. "I'm going through a divorce," Mark continued. "It's been months, but it still hits me at the worst times. Tonight, I just couldn't sit alone anymore." Emily nodded. She didn't interrupt. She had learned that sometimes people didn't need advice. They needed space to speak. Upstairs, Daniel paused. He had heard voices. He checked the clock. Confused, then walked to the top of the stairs. He didn't come down. He listened, curious but not worried. In the kitchen, Mark talked about his empty apartment, the silence that waited for him every night. He spoke about mistakes he wished. He could undo words he wished he had said sooner. He didn't blame anyone. He sounded honest, tired. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. She understood loneliness more than she liked to admit. She had never been alone in the same way, but she knew what it felt like to sit beside someone and still feel unseen. "I'm sorry you're going through that," she said. Mark looked at her then, really looked at her. "Thank you for listening. Most people tell me to just move on." Emily smiled gently. Moving on isn't always that simple. They stood there for a moment, the air quiet but not uncomfortable. Emily noticed how calm she felt, how focused. She wasn't thinking about chores or tomorrow's plans. She was present. Daniel came down the stairs slowly. "Hey," he said, surprised. "Mark." Mark turned quickly. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drop in so late." Daniel smiled, easy and polite. "It's fine. Everything okay?" "Yes," Mark said. "I was just heading out." Emily felt a small, strange disappointment she couldn't explain. After Mark left, Daniel locked the door and looked at Emily. "You okay?" She nodded. "He's having a hard time." Daniel shrugged. "I know. Work's been rough for him." They moved on with their night, but Emily couldn't stop thinking about the visit. Not the words Mark had said, but how she had felt while listening. Needed, trusted, awake later. Lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside her. She told herself nothing had happened, that she had done the right thing. That kindness was harmless. Still, she felt like a line had been drawn somewhere she couldn't see. Across town, Mark sat alone in his car, hands on the wheel, breathing slowly. He hadn't planned to stay that long. He hadn't planned to feel lighter when he left. He hadn't expected Emily's quiet attention to settle him in a way nothing else had. 3 people went to sleep that night believing the same thing. Was just a conversation, just a moment, just help. None of them knew it was the beginning. Emily couldn't stop thinking about Mark. The first visit had felt like a spark in a quiet room. A small light that made her aware of what she had been missing in her own life. It wasn't about Mark in a romantic way, not yet, but about connection. About someone noticing her in a way Daniel hadn't recently. She told herself it was harmless. She told herself that she was simply being kind. But a part of her heart was restless, awake in a way it hadn't been in years. A few days later, Mark returned. This time, he didn't come unannounced. He called Emily first, hesitated over the phone, then explained why he needed someone to talk to. She agreed. Emily felt the familiar tug in her chest as she opened the door. His smile was tired, but there was a softness to it now, a vulnerability that made her want to reach out. The rain had stopped, but the evening was gray, heavy with clouds. It seemed to mirror the mood he carried inside. Inside, Emily poured tea. Mark settled at the kitchen table, his posture stiff, shoulders hunched as if the weight of his own life rested on them. "I don't know why I keep coming back," he admitted. "I just need someone who doesn't judge. Someone who listens." Emily nodded quietly. Yes. She understood. Everyone needed that at some point, and she knew it deeply because she had spent years giving herself fully to others. Daniel. Her parents, her friends, without anyone really listening back. Their conversations started cautiously, practical. At first, Mark spoke about work projects, about long days filled with meetings and responsibilities. Emily offered advice where she could, suggested solutions, and sometimes just nodded. She noticed small details about him, how he sipped his tea slowly, the way his eyes softened when he talked about his daughter, about weekends he barely got to see her. Emily found herself wanting to learn more, not because it was inappropriate, but because she genuinely cared about his struggles. As the days passed, the visits became more frequent. Emily started to look forward to them, not because she wanted to betray Daniel, but because for the first time in a long time, someone's presence felt exciting in a gentle, emotional way. Mark listened differently than Daniel did. He asked questions that made her think, that reminded her of dreams she had long buried. He asked about her own work, about her passions, about the art she used to love. The questions were simple but meaningful, and Emily realized she hadn't spoken about herself like that in years. Daniel noticed subtle changes. Emily laughed more. Often when Mark came over, though, she tried to hide it. She checked her phone with a quick glance, and she sometimes seemed lost in thought, staring out the window after he left. Daniel asked a few times if she was okay, and she always answered too quickly, "I'm fine." He didn't push further, though part of him felt a small sting. A quiet awareness that something had shifted, that the warmth he expected to see every day was being shared somewhere else. One evening, Mark arrived unusually quiet. Emily noticed immediately. His eyes were darker, his smile forced. He had brought papers from work, but they stayed untouched. Instead, he talked about loneliness, about nights when he returned to Anne. empty apartment and felt nothing but the echo of his own thoughts. Emily listened, not judging, not interrupting, letting him speak. She could feel the raw emotion beneath his words. And it made her heart ache not for Mark's suffering, but for the human need to be seen and understood. "I don't want to burden you," he said finally, voice low. "But I feel like I can tell you things I can't tell anyone else. Strange, isn't it?" Emily shook her head. "Not strange, normal. We all need someone to notice us sometimes, to really hear us." He looked at her, and for a moment their eyes held. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loneliness, of longing. She felt it. Too, a pull that scared her and thrilled her at the same time. Emily began noticing the little things. The way Mark would listen without trying to fix everything. The way he remembered details she mentioned in passing. The small compliments he gave her not about appearance, but about her thoughts, her ideas, her perspective. She realized that while Daniel loved her steadily, Mark's attention made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. It was intoxicating, subtle, and confusing. She kept everything in check. No words were spoken that crossed the line. No touches lingered. But inside, Emily felt emotions she hadn't expected: curiosity, excitement, a kind of longing that wasn't physical, but emotional. She started to understand that connection could be just as powerful as romance, sometimes more so. And that scared her more than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Daniel tried to remain unaware. He noticed small shifts in Miley's lighter mood, her distracted glances, but he attributed them to everyday life, to stress, to nothing serious. Still, one evening, when Emily seemed miles away while folding laundry together, he asked softly, "Are you happy?" She answered quickly, "Of course," because the truth was messy and confusing even to her. Lying felt safer than unpacking the storm of emotions inside her. Emily felt a tension growing, invisible but undeniable. Every time Mark left, there was a hollow ache in her chest. She told herself it was simply empathy, kindness, concern. But the intensity of her feelings began to blur lines she had always considered fixed. She loved Daniel, that was clear. But she realized she had also opened a small door in her heart for something or someone unexpected. Mark sensed it too. He noticed how she looked at him, how she lingered on his words. But he never crossed boundaries. He never acted inappropriately. His presence was simply a mirror to Emily's own emotional needs, reflecting things she had long ignored in her marriage. And in that reflection, she began to confront parts of herself she had forgotten. Desire for attention, for intimacy, for being truly understood. The balance was delicate. One wrong word, one misstep, and it could all collapse. Emily feared it, but she couldn't stop herself from engaging, from listening, from caring. Every conversation deepened the connection. Every shared moment added weight to the silent tension between her, Daniel, and Mark. She felt caught in the middle of something she didn't fully understand, a quiet storm building in her heart. One evening after Mark left, Emily sat alone on the couch. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel comforting this time. She realized that even small emotional experiences could leave marks, could change how you saw your life, your marriage. She thought about Daniel, about the steady love they shared, and felt a pang of guilt. She thought about Mark, about the ease with which he understood her, and felt a pang of longing. The mix was confusing, bittersweet, and undeniable. Emily knew things were shifting. Not because anyone had done anything wrong, but because emotional closeness had a power that was hard to contain. She felt alive, aware, and vulnerable all at once. She realized that her heart could feel more than one thing at a time, and that was both beautiful and terrifying. By the end of that week, Emily understood one thing clearly: the quiet moments, the gentle attention, the shared understanding they had already started to change her. She didn't know how far the change would go or what it would cost her. But she knew life would never feel exactly the same again. And deep down, she feared that Daniel would sense it before she had the chance to fully understand it herself. And that fear was just the beginning.